Elara Vance. That was me, a few years ago. Naive, hopeful, utterly convinced I'd found my forever. Funny how life throws you a curveball disguised as a fairy tale, isn't it? My story isn't unique, I know. There are thousands of us out there, women who loved too hard, trusted too blindly, and ended up picking up the shattered pieces of their lives from the cold, unforgiving floor. But even if the skeleton of the story is common, the details, the specific gut punches, those are mine. And they still sting, even now, years later, though the scars have faded into something almost beautiful, a testament to what I survived. It started, as these things often do, with a whirlwind. Julian Thorne. Even his name sounded like something out of a romance novel, didn't it? Tall, with eyes the color of warm honey and a smile that could disarm a bomb. He worked in tech, he said, something vague about AI development, always on the cusp of a big breakthrough. He had this easy confidence, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even when it was packed. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming, a loud, chaotic affair where I was mostly hiding in a corner, nursing a lukewarm drink, feeling utterly out of place amidst the swirling laughter and boisterous conversations. He just appeared. Like a mirage, but solid, real, his presence a sudden, calming anchor in the vibrant chaos. He leaned against the wall next to me, not invading my space, just observing with that quiet, intense gaze that seemed to see right through the superficiality and into the core of who I was. He didn't try to charm me with flashy jokes or performative gestures. Instead, he asked about the worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude I was clutching, its pages dog-eared from countless rereads, a silent shield against the overwhelming social energy. And just like that, we were talking. Hours melted away, the party noise fading into a distant hum, becoming nothing more than background static to the symphony of our conversation. He was witty, intelligent, surprisingly vulnerable about his own struggles, a recent setback with an investor, the crushing weight of expectation, the lonely path of a visionary. He listened. Really listened. It wasn't just waiting for his turn to speak, a common conversational tic I'd grown accustomed to. It was active, engaged listening, the kind that makes you feel seen, truly seen, for the first time. He remembered details I'd barely registered saying, referenced obscure literary allusions I'd dropped, and responded with a thoughtful depth that both surprised and captivated me. His eyes held a flicker of something ancient, something wise, that belied his youthful energy, and I found myself drawn into the orbit of his seemingly profound understanding of the world. He made me feel like my thoughts, my opinions, my very existence, mattered. And for someone who had often felt overlooked, that feeling was intoxicating. Within weeks, we were inseparable. It felt like we'd known each other for years, not days. Our lives intertwined with an effortless grace that felt almost predestined. We had inside jokes that only we understood, shared playlists that soundtracked our drives and quiet evenings, a comfortable rhythm that settled over us like a warm, familiar blanket. He'd leave little notes for me on the fridge, always with a silly doodle, a stick figure version of me with a thought bubble, a tiny heart, or a ridiculously exaggerated caricature of our cat, Mittens. He remembered my favorite coffee order down to the exact temperature and the obscure indie bands I loved, even downloading their entire discographies to surprise me. He'd cook elaborate dinners for me, even though he claimed he couldn't boil water, meticulously following recipes with a focused intensity that was both endearing and slightly comical, and then laugh with genuine amusement as we inevitably ordered takeout when his culinary experiments went awry. It was the small things, you know? The way he'd absent-mindedly trace patterns on my arm when we were watching TV, his touch light and comforting, the way he'd pull me closer in his sleep, his breath warm against my neck. The way he'd always pick up my call, no matter what time of day or night, his voice instantly softening when he heard mine. He made me feel safe, cherished, like I finally had a harbor in the chaotic, often turbulent, sea of my life. I'd spent so long feeling adrift, navigating the choppy waters of a demanding job in corporate marketing and the lingering insecurities from a less than stellar childhood where I often felt like I had to earn love and attention. Julian was the anchor I never knew I needed, the steady presence that promised stability and unwavering support. He was stable, or so I thought. He talked about our future with such certainty, a little house with a garden in the suburbs, maybe a dog, lazy Sundays spent reading side by side and drinking coffee on a sun-drenched porch. He even talked about kids, a topic I'd always shied away from, feeling too overwhelmed by the idea of such a profound responsibility, but with him, it felt right. Possible. Desirable, even. He painted a picture of a life so idyllic, so perfectly aligned with my deepest, unspoken desires, that I couldn't help but surrender to the fantasy. He was everything I'd ever wanted, everything I'd ever dreamed of. And I was so tired of dreaming alone. My best friend, Chloe, was initially wary. Chloe, bless her pragmatic heart, always saw the world in shades of gray, preferring to dissect situations with a sharp, analytical mind, while I, apparently, preferred rose-tinted glasses, choosing to see the best in people, often to my own detriment. "He seems a bit too perfect, Elara," she'd said over our weekly brunch, stirring her latte with a thoughtful frown. "Like he walked straight out of a rom-com, no flaws? No quirks? That's suspicious." I'd laughed it off, attributing it to her usual cynicism, her protective instincts kicking in. "You just haven't met your Prince Charming yet, Chloe," I'd teased, nudging her playfully. "You're just jealous." But even then, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of unease danced in the periphery of my mind, a fleeting shadow that whispered a warning I quickly silenced. He was charming, yes, but wasn't that a good thing? He was attentive, but wasn't that what I deserved after years of feeling unseen? I wanted to believe it so badly, the narrative of perfect love, that I pushed away any thought that threatened to disrupt the pristine, carefully constructed story I was building in my head. He was everything I'd ever wanted, everything I'd ever dreamed of. And I was so tired of dreaming alone. The idea of him being anything less than perfect was simply too painful to contemplate. I had invested so much emotional energy, so much hope, into this relationship that to question it felt like questioning my own judgment, my own capacity for happiness. He was always on the verge of something big with his tech startup. He'd talk about venture capitalists, angel investors, the next big thing in AI, always with a glint in his eye and an almost evangelical fervor. It was exciting, intoxicating even, to be so close to someone on the cusp of greatness, to feel like I was privy to the inner workings of a genius mind. He'd often work late, sometimes pulling all-nighters, fueled by coffee and an almost manic energy that seemed to defy the laws of human endurance. I admired his drive, his ambition, his relentless pursuit of innovation. I'd bring him late-night snacks, his favorite artisanal cheeses and crackers, a thermos of strong coffee, or just sit quietly beside him, offering moral support, a silent presence in the hum of his creative intensity. He'd tell me I was his muse, his rock, the only one who truly understood his vision, who believed in him when the world doubted. And I believed him. I believed every word, every grand pronouncement, every promise of a future built on his brilliance. My own career, while stable and respectable, I was a senior marketing manager at a mid-sized firm, a job I enjoyed but didn't necessarily feel passionate about, felt mundane next to his dazzling potential. I was a cog in a corporate machine, while he, on the other hand, was an innovator, a visionary, a disruptor. He made me feel like I was part of something bigger. Something world-changing, just by being by his side, by supporting his endeavors. That sense of shared purpose, even if it was largely his purpose, was incredibly alluring, a powerful draw that overshadowed any lingering doubts. I started to see my own steady income not just as a means to my own comfort, but as a potential safety net, a stable financial foundation upon which his grand ambitions could be built. It felt like a partnership, a true collaboration of lives and dreams, a symbiotic relationship where my practicality balanced his boundless creativity. I was the quiet strength, the steady hand, the grounded reality, while he was the brilliant, soaring mind, the architect of our shared future. And for a long time, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like everything. The thought of a life without him, without this shared vision, was simply unimaginable. I was utterly, completely, and dangerously in love. The first real crack, the one that truly registered, albeit briefly, wasn't a dramatic event. It was a slow, almost imperceptible shift in the air, like the pressure dropping before a storm, a subtle change in atmospheric conditions that hinted at turbulence to come. It started with small things, things I could easily rationalize away, things that, in isolation, seemed insignificant. Julian became a little less available. His work became more demanding, more secretive, shrouded in a veil of corporate espionage and high-stakes negotiations. He'd take calls in the other room, his voice hushed, almost conspiratorial, the words indistinguishable, just a low murmur that hinted at important, clandestine dealings. When I'd ask about it, a casual question about his day, he'd simply say, "Investor stuff, babe. You wouldn't understand. Confidentiality agreements, you know? High-level negotiations. It's all very sensitive right now." And I'd nod, trying to appear understanding, trying not to feel the tiny prickle of exclusion, the faint sting of being on the outside of his glamorous, high-stakes world. He was building something big, I reminded myself, something that would define our future. Of course, it would require discretion. Of course, he couldn't share every detail with me, a mere marketing manager. I was being silly, insecure, letting my own anxieties cloud my judgment. I pushed the feeling down, deep into the recesses of my mind, unwilling to acknowledge the growing unease. Then came the loans. Not outright demands, never that crude or unsophisticated. Always framed as a temporary investment, a crucial bridge to secure a major deal, a vital injection of capital to push his revolutionary prototype across the finish line. "Elara, baby, I know this is a big ask," he'd begin, his voice laced with a carefully calibrated vulnerability, "but my seed funding is just a week away, the contracts are being finalized, and I need to cover some unexpected server costs for this new prototype. It's a critical moment. Could you front me, say, 5,000? It's a short-term thing, a mere blip. I'll pay you back with interest the moment the funds clear, plus a bonus for your unwavering support." His eyes would be earnest, wide, and sincere, his hand clasping mine, squeezing gently, a comforting pressure that belied the financial strain he was about to inflict. He'd make it sound like he was doing me a favor by letting me in on this ground floor opportunity, a chance to be part of his meteoric rise, a privileged glimpse into the world of high finance. And I, ever the supportive partner, ever the believer in his genius, ever the hopeful romantic, would transfer the money. 5,000 became 10, then 20, then 30, each transaction accompanied by a new, equally plausible, equally urgent reason. Always with the promise of imminent repayment, a repayment that never quite materialized. He'd always have a new, equally urgent reason why the funds were delayed, why the investors were dragging their feet, why a crucial component was suddenly more expensive, why a regulatory hurdle had unexpectedly appeared. And I, instead of questioning, instead of demanding accountability, would find myself feeling guilty for even thinking about asking for it back. He was under so much pressure, I reasoned. My money was helping him achieve his dreams, our dreams. It was an investment in our future, a small sacrifice for a much larger, brighter tomorrow. The financial strain was real, but the emotional investment was far greater, binding me to him with invisible, unbreakable threads. He also started subtly chipping away at my confidence, a slow, insidious erosion that I barely noticed at first. It wasn't overt criticism, not at first, never so crude as to be easily identifiable. It was more insidious, a gentle undermining disguised as loving guidance. I'd recount a success at work, a challenging project I'd aced, a difficult client I'd won over, and he'd nod, smile, then gently pivot. "That's great, babe. You're so good at the day-to-day stuff, the execution. But you know, real innovation, that's where the big impact is, the true legacy. You've got such a sharp mind, Elara, you could be doing so much more, something truly groundbreaking. Or, if I was upset about something, a difficult conversation with a colleague, a minor setback at work, he'd say, with a paternalistic sigh, "You're so sensitive, Elara. You need to toughen up if you want to make it in the real world, in the cutthroat world of true ambition. You take things too personally." He'd frame it as constructive criticism, as him wanting me to be the best version of myself, to reach my full potential, to transcend my perceived limitations. And because I valued his opinion so much, because I saw him as this brilliant, successful person, a visionary who saw things I couldn't, I started to believe him. I started to think I was too sensitive, too focused on the mundane, not ambitious enough, not visionary enough. My own achievements, once a source of quiet pride, began to feel smaller, less significant, under the shadow of his grand pronouncements and his thinly veiled disdain for anything less than revolutionary. I found myself second-guessing my decisions, my instincts, my very perceptions of reality. I started dressing differently, trying to be more cutting-edge, more innovative, to impress him, to gain his approval, to finally be seen as worthy of his brilliance. It was a slow erosion, a gradual chipping away at my self-worth, disguised as loving guidance, as a desire for my betterment. I was losing myself, piece by painful piece, without even realizing it. My friends started noticing, too. Chloe, especially. "You seem quieter, Elara," she'd said one evening, watching me pick at my salad with a detached air, my usual vibrant energy replaced by a subdued introspection. "And you're always talking about Julian's work, his potential, his struggles. What about yours? What about you? What happened to the Elara who used to light up a room with her stories?" I'd brush her off, saying I was just tired, or that I was so excited for Julian's success that it consumed my thoughts, that his world was simply more interesting than my own. But her words, like tiny pebbles, started to accumulate in the back of my mind, a growing pile of unspoken concerns. Another friend, Marcus, a colleague from a previous job who was always sharp-eyed and possessed an uncanny ability to read people, once made a pointed comment. We were at a company happy hour, and Julian had joined us briefly, making a grand entrance, instantly becoming the center of attention. He was charming everyone, as usual, regaling them with stories of his imminent breakthrough, his disruptive technology, his revolutionary vision. Marcus leaned over to me, a slight frown on his face, his voice low. "He's very polished, isn't he? Almost too polished. Like a politician, or a salesman who's just learned his script." I'd laughed, a little too loudly, a brittle sound that cracked in the humid air, and said, "That's just Julian. He's a natural networker, a visionary." But Marcus's words, like Chloe's, lingered. They were seeds of doubt, planted in fertile ground, waiting for the right conditions to sprout, to blossom into a terrifying realization. I was so desperate for this perfect love, this perfect life, this perfect man, that I actively suppressed any evidence that contradicted the meticulously crafted narrative. I wanted to be the supportive girlfriend, the one who believed when no one else did, the loyal partner who stood by her man through thick and thin. I wanted to be the woman who helped her man achieve his dreams, who shared in his glory. And that desire, that deep-seated longing for a shared future, for a life that finally felt complete, made me blind. It made me deaf to the warning signs that were, in hindsight, screaming at me, echoing in the quiet corners of my increasingly anxious mind. One evening, Julian came home looking utterly defeated, his usual swagger replaced by a slumped posture and a haunted expression. He slumped onto the sofa, running a hand through his already disheveled hair, his eyes vacant. "It's over, Elara," he mumbled, his voice thick with despair, barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. "The big deal. The one I told you about. It fell through. The investors pulled out at the last minute. Said the market wasn't ready for my vision. Said I was too far ahead of my time. Everything, gone. All my hard work, all my sacrifices, all for nothing. My heart plummeted, a leaden weight in my chest. This was it, the moment I dreaded, the inevitable crash after such a dizzying ascent. All his hard work, all our shared sacrifices, seemingly for nothing. I rushed to him, pulling him into a tight hug, stroking his hair, trying to offer comfort through physical touch. No, Julian, no. It's not gone. We'll figure it out. You're brilliant. This is just a setback, a temporary delay. You'll bounce back. You always do. He buried his face in my shoulder, his body shaking with what I assumed were sobs, though I heard no sound. But, the prototype. The server fees. I put everything into it. My savings, my credit cards. I'm ruined. Financially, emotionally, completely ruined. He looked up, his eyes glistening with what I perceived as tears, though his face remained oddly dry. I even borrowed from my family. My elderly aunt, my ailing mother. And now I can't pay them back. They'll disown me. They'll lose everything because of me. The desperation in his voice was palpable, a raw, exposed wound. It tore at my heart, twisting it with a profound empathy. He was so vulnerable, so broken, so utterly defeated. I couldn't bear to see him like that, the man who had always seemed so invincible, now reduced to a trembling mess. How much, Julian? I asked, my voice soft, barely a whisper, filled with a desperate need to fix his pain. He hesitated, then mumbled a figure that made my stomach clench, a number that seemed impossibly large, astronomical even. 50,000. I know it's a lot, Elara. I wouldn't ask, I truly wouldn't, but, my family. They're threatening to cut me off, to disinherit me. It's a matter of honor, of family legacy. My savings, the nest egg I'd meticulously built over years of careful budgeting and disciplined saving, was nowhere near that amount. But I had equity in my apartment, a small inheritance from my grandmother that I had always considered untouchable, a sacred trust. I could get a loan. I could help him. I had to. He was my future. He was our future. And I would do anything to protect it. The decision to take out a significant loan, leveraging my apartment's equity, felt like a monumental act of faith, a leap into the unknown, a profound declaration of my commitment. It wasn't just money, it was a piece of my security, a part of my past, a tangible representation of my grandmother's legacy, being poured into Julian's future, into our future. He was effusive in his gratitude, showering me with promises of immediate repayment, of how this was just a temporary hurdle, a minor blip on the radar, how he'd make it all back and more once his next big idea took off, once his true vision was realized. He even talked about putting my name on the deed of his future company, making me a partner, a co-owner, a testament to my unwavering belief in him. You're not just my girlfriend, Elara, he'd said, holding my face in his hands, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones, his eyes burning with an intense, seemingly genuine affection. You're my rock, my partner in crime, my co-conspirator in greatness. I couldn't do any of this without you. And in that moment, despite the gnawing anxiety in my gut, the faint tremor of fear that whispered of recklessness, I felt a surge of pride, a deep satisfaction. I was doing something meaningful, something brave, something truly selfless, for the man I loved, for the future we were building. I was an integral part of his journey, his success, his very being. But with the financial entanglement came a new layer of control, a subtle tightening of the web, a gradual constriction that I barely noticed until I was already ensnared. Julian became even more possessive of my time, my energy, my attention. My evenings were expected to be spent with him, comforting him, listening to his new ideas, poring over his business plans that seemed to consist mostly of vague diagrams, buzzwords, and an endless stream of optimistic projections. If I made plans with Chloe or other friends, he'd sigh dramatically, or make a comment about how he really needed me that night, how he was feeling down and only I could cheer him up, how my absence would leave him utterly bereft. Slowly, imperceptibly, my social circle began to shrink, like a slowly deflating balloon. Chloe would call less often, sensing my unavailability, the subtle barriers I was putting up. When we did manage to meet, I'd find myself censoring my complaints about Julian, afraid of sounding disloyal, or worse, afraid of hearing her dreaded "I told you so," the confirmation of my own foolishness. I was becoming isolated, my world narrowing to just Julian and his ever-present needs, his emotional demands, his insatiable hunger for my attention and resources. My identity was slowly being subsumed by his. His mood swings also became more pronounced, more frequent, more jarring. One moment, he'd be charming and affectionate, showering me with compliments and physical affection. The next, he'd be cold and distant, snapping at me over trivial things, a misplaced remote, a forgotten grocery item, a slight delay in my response to his texts. If I questioned him about anything, a late night, a vague answer about his whereabouts, the lack of progress on his repayment plan, the inconsistencies in his stories, he'd turn it around on me, his voice laced with a wounded indignation. "Why are you so distrustful, Elara? Don't you believe in me? After everything I've told you, everything we've been through, all the sacrifices I've made? It hurts, you know, when the person you love most doubts you, when they question your integrity." He'd make me feel guilty for having legitimate concerns, for daring to question his narrative, for not being supportive enough. This was the gaslighting, though I didn't have a name for it then. I just felt perpetually confused, constantly questioning my own perceptions, my own sanity. Was I being unreasonable? Was I too demanding? Was I ruining things by being so negative, so untrusting? I started apologizing for things I hadn't even done, for feelings I was perfectly entitled to have, just to appease him, to bring back the warmth, the affection, the Julian I thought I knew, the Julian who had made me feel so loved and secure. He also started to subtly mock my interests, my passions, my very essence. I loved reading, art, quiet evenings spent with a good book and a cup of tea. He'd scoff, a dismissive sound that cut deeper than any outright insult. "Seriously, Elara? Another historical drama? Don't you want to engage with something more stimulating? Something that actually challenges your mind, something that pushes the boundaries of thought?" He'd push me to watch documentaries about obscure scientific theories or listen to podcasts about cryptocurrency, topics I found utterly uninteresting, but which he insisted were essential knowledge for anyone truly intelligent. If I expressed a different opinion, a dissenting view, he'd dismiss it with a patronizing chuckle, a gentle pat on my head that felt like a slap. "Oh, Elara, you're so sweet, but you just don't have the background for this. It's a bit beyond your scope, darling." It wasn't just about my interests, it was about my intelligence, my worldview. My very capacity for independent thought. He was slowly, systematically, dismantling my sense of self, replacing it with his own version of what I should be, a version that was constantly striving, constantly failing, to meet his unspoken expectations. I started to feel like a lesser version of myself, constantly striving to meet his unspoken expectations, constantly failing, constantly feeling inadequate. The vibrant, curious woman I once was slowly fading, replaced by a shadow of his making. One evening, I overheard him on a phone call. He was in the next room, the door slightly ajar, his voice low, but the apartment was quiet, and I caught snippets. "Yeah, she's totally wrapped around my finger. Bless her naive little heart. Got her to front me the cash for the server fees. She thinks it's an investment in our future. Hilarious, right?" A cold dread seeped into my bones, a chilling certainty that made my blood run cold. It couldn't be. He couldn't be talking about me. My mind scrambled for an alternative explanation, a benign interpretation, but none came. I pressed my ear against the door, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. No, no, the old man's fine. Just needed an excuse for the big ask. She's got this inheritance, you see. A real gold mine. From her dead grandmother. Pathetic, really, how easily she fell for it. He chuckled, a sound that was utterly devoid of the warmth I thought I knew, a chilling, guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. Don't worry, I'll cut her loose before she gets too clingy. Just need to milk this cow a little longer. Got another fish on the line, a much bigger catch. The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable a hammer strike against my already fragile sense of reality. My grandmother's inheritance. The loan. The server fees. The family emergency. It was all a lie. A calculated, cruel, utterly heartless lie. I stumbled back from the door, my legs suddenly weak, my body trembling uncontrollably. The room spun, the familiar furniture blurring into an indistinct mess. The air felt thin, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space. My perfect world, my safe harbor, my carefully constructed future, had just imploded, shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The man I loved, the man I'd trusted with my future, with my very soul, was a con artist. A predator. And I was his mark. His victim. The realization was a searing, agonizing pain, worse than any physical wound. The world didn't just stop, it fractured, splintering into a million sharp shards of agonizing reality. Every memory, every touch, every whispered promise from Julian became tainted, distorted, seen through the grotesque lens of his deceit. The warmth of his smile transformed into a predatory smirk, his honeyed words now laced with venom. His comforting embrace felt like a cage, a trap from which I desperately wanted to escape. The words I'd overheard on the phone call replayed in my mind on an endless, horrifying loop. Bless her naive little heart, milk this cow a little longer. The humiliation was a physical ache, a searing burn that spread through my chest, making it hard to breathe, making my lungs feel as if they were filled with concrete. I stood there, frozen, in the middle of my living room, the space that had once felt so safe, so filled with love, now a stage for his elaborate, cruel deception. My apartment, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a trap, a gilded cage from which I desperately needed to break free. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers, to unleash the torrent of rage and pain that was building inside me. But a deeper, colder part of me, the part that was still reeling from the shock, the part that recognized the cunning of his manipulation, knew that wasn't the move. He was a master manipulator, a seasoned liar. He'd twist my words, deny everything with convincing sincerity, make me feel like I was the crazy one, the delusional ex-girlfriend. I needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof that would leave no room for doubt, no space for his lies to take root. My mind, usually a chaotic mess of swirling thoughts and anxieties, became razor-sharp, focused with an almost terrifying clarity. I had to be smart. I had to be calm. I had to play his game, just for a little while longer, until I had all the pieces in place. Over the next few days, I moved through life like a ghost, a phantom presence in my own home. I smiled when he smiled, a brittle, forced curve of my lips. I nodded when he spoke, pretending to listen to his endless monologues about his brilliant ideas and imminent successes. I pretended everything was normal, a meticulously crafted performance for an audience of one. But inside, a furious storm raged, a tempest of anger, pain, and a chilling resolve. Every interaction was a performance, every word a lie, every touch a violation. I watched him, truly watched him, for the first time, seeing him not through the rose-tinted glasses of love, but with the cold, analytical gaze of a detective. I saw the subtle glint in his eye when he talked about his next big venture, the way he'd subtly steer conversations towards my finances, his casual dismissiveness when I mentioned anything about my own life that didn't directly involve him or his grand schemes. He was a chameleon, adapting his persona to suit his needs, to charm his next victim, and I had been too blind, too trusting, too desperate for love, to see it. The charming, vulnerable man I thought I knew was a meticulously crafted facade, a hollow shell designed to lure unsuspecting women into his web. My investigation began subtly, carefully, like a cat stalking its prey. I started with his startup. He had mentioned a co-founder, a brilliant but eccentric guy named Mark, who was supposedly the technical genius behind the AI. A quick search on LinkedIn yielded nothing. No Mark, no startup, no impressive tech breakthroughs, no company registration. Just a handful of generic profiles with similar names, none of which matched his vague descriptions. Then I looked into the venture capitalists he'd name-dropped, the powerful figures he claimed were vying for a piece of his genius. Again, dead ends. No public records of their involvement with any company matching his description, no news articles, no press releases. My heart sank further with each empty search result, each confirmation of his elaborate deception. It wasn't just a small lie, it was an entire fabricated reality, a house of cards built on a foundation of deceit. Then came the financial dive, the most painful part of my investigation. I knew his family emergency loan, the one that had supposedly saved his ailing mother and elderly aunt, had been deposited into a specific account. I found the bank statements, hidden under a pile of his important documents, a stack of meticulously organized, yet utterly meaningless, papers. The transactions were meticulously logged, a damning trail of his deceit. The money hadn't gone to a sick relative, to medical bills, or to any legitimate family emergency. It had gone to high-end restaurants, luxury boutiques, exotic travel agencies. And a significant chunk, a truly staggering amount, had been transferred to an account under a different name, a name that wasn't Julian Thorne. It was a woman's name. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over me. Not only was he a con artist, systematically draining my finances, he was likely cheating on me, too. The betrayal was deeper, more complex, more utterly devastating than I had initially imagined. He wasn't just using me for money, he was living a double life, funding it with my hard-earned savings, with my grandmother's legacy. I also started looking at his social media, something I rarely did because he was so private, so guarded about his online presence. He had a separate, less active Instagram account, which I only found by chance through a mutual friend's tagged photo. It was mostly landscape shots, generic travel photos, seemingly innocuous. But then, buried deep in the comments of one picture, I saw it. A series of playful banter, intimate emojis, and inside jokes with the woman whose name was on the bank account. Her profile was public, a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. I clicked. And there it was. Photos of them together, looking cozy, intimate, their faces beaming with genuine affection. Photos from their vacation, the one he'd told me he was taking for business development, for networking with potential investors. Photos of them at a Michelin-starred restaurant, the same restaurant he'd told me he was having a late-night meeting at, a crucial negotiation for his startup. And then, the ultimate gut punch, the final, crushing blow, a photo of them, arms around each other, beaming, with a caption that read, 2 years of adventures with my amazing fiancée. Can't wait for forever. Fiancée. 2 years. My world tilted on its axis, spinning wildly out of control. He wasn't just cheating, he was engaged. He had been engaged for 2 years, while simultaneously building a life with me, draining my finances, and planning our future. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded calculation, the unmitigated cruelty, was breathtaking. I felt a primal scream building in my throat, a desperate, guttural cry of pain and rage, but I swallowed it down, forcing it back. Not yet. Not now. I needed to be stronger. I needed to be smarter. I needed to make him pay. And I would. The rage was a cold, steady flame now, burning away the last vestiges of my naive love, incinerating the fragile remnants of the fantasy I had clung to for so long. It wasn't just about the money anymore, or the shattered dreams, or the profound humiliation. It was about the utter contempt he had shown for me, for my trust, for my very existence, for the sacred bond one thought we shared. Bless her naive little heart. Those words echoed, fueling my resolve, hardening my heart. I wouldn't just expose him, I would dismantle his carefully constructed world, piece by agonizing piece, until there was nothing left but the hollow, pathetic truth. And I would do it on my terms, with precision and dignity, not with a messy, emotional outburst. My first call was to Chloe. I knew she'd be hurt, angry, and probably a little bit smug about her initial warnings, her uncanny ability to see through his polished facade. But she was my rock, my true north, the one person I knew I could always count on. I needed her. I told her everything, the overheard conversation, the fake startup, the damning bank statements, the other woman, the fiancée, the entire grotesque tapestry of his lies. Chloe listened in stunned silence, her face a mask of disbelief, then let out a string of expletives that would make a sailor blush, her anger a mirror of my own. That bastard. I knew he was too good to be true. Oh, Elara, I am so sorry. How could he do this to you? Her anger was a balm, a shared outrage that made me feel less alone in my humiliation, less like a fool. She immediately offered to help, to be my sounding board, my accomplice, her loyalty unwavering. What do you want to do? She asked, her voice firm, resolute. We burn him to the ground. But I didn't want a messy, public meltdown, a chaotic scene that would only further expose my pain. I wanted surgical precision. I wanted him to feel the slow, creeping dread of exposure, the kind that comes from knowing his carefully constructed lies were unraveling, one by one, with no way to stop the inevitable. I wanted justice, not just revenge. And I wanted my money back. Every single penny, every hard-earned dollar he had stolen from me. I started meticulously documenting everything, building an ironclad case against him. Screenshots of his fiancée's social media, the damning bank statements, the fabricated emails he'd sent about his business deals, even recordings of some of his gaslighting conversations. I'd started recording them on my phone, a paranoid habit born of his constant denials and my growing sense of unease. I compiled it all into a digital dossier, a damning narrative of his deceit, a meticulously organized collection of irrefutable proof. I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman Chloe recommended, Ms. Davies, who specialized in financial fraud. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable, her gaze steady, then nodded slowly. This is a strong case for fraud, Ms. Vance. And emotional distress. We can pursue this aggressively. The word fraud felt like a heavy stone, confirming the depth of his betrayal, the criminal nature of his actions. The plan began to form, taking shape in the quiet hours of the night. Julian's birthday was approaching, a date circled on my calendar with a growing sense of grim anticipation. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about a lavish celebration, expecting me to organize it, of course, to foot the bill, to cater to his insatiable ego. He even suggested inviting some of his investor contacts, likely more marks for his next scam, more unsuspecting victims to lure into his web. This was my opportunity. This was where I would flip the script, where I would turn his own arrogance against him. I would host the party, just as he expected, a grand celebration of his supposed success. I would invite all the people he wanted to impress, his network, his potential victims. And then, at the height of his self-congratulation, I would expose him. Not with a shout, not with a scene, but with cold, hard facts, with undeniable proof. The week leading up to the party was a blur of calculated deception, a masterclass in feigned affection. I acted the part of the doting girlfriend, planning every detail with meticulous care, ordering his favorite artisanal cake, sending out elegant invitations to his network and our mutual friends. He was utterly oblivious, basking in the attention, making grand pronouncements about his imminent success and how this birthday would mark a new, glorious chapter for him, for us. He even had the audacity to talk about our future, our shared dreams, with a sickening sincerity that made my stomach clench with revulsion. "This year, Elara," he'd said, pulling me close, his breath warm on my neck, "this is our year. Big things are coming for us, darling. Bigger than you can imagine." I just smiled, a tight, controlled smile that didn't reach my eyes, and nodded, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. "Oh, big things are coming, Julian. Just not the kind you expect. Not the kind you deserve." I also reached out to Marcus, my former colleague, the journalist. He was a sharp, ethical reporter, specializing in investigative pieces on corporate fraud and white-collar crime. I approached him carefully, vaguely mentioning a story lead about a manipulative individual, a potential expose that could shake up the local tech scene. He was intrigued, his journalistic instincts immediately piqued. I didn't give him all the details yet, but I laid the groundwork, hinting at a major expose, a story that would be impossible to ignore. He agreed to be on standby, ready to move the moment I gave him the green light. I knew he'd handle the information responsibly, professionally, ensuring that the truth was presented with integrity. This wasn't about public shaming for shaming's sake. It was about preventing him from doing this to anyone else, about protecting future victims. It was about justice, pure and unadulterated. The final piece of the puzzle was Julian's fiancée. Her name was Serena. She seemed sweet, innocent in her social media photos, completely unaware of the monster she was engaged to, the elaborate web of lies that defined his existence. I debated whether to contact her directly, to warn her, to spare her the pain I had endured. But then I decided against it. She deserved to hear it from Julian, or at least, to witness his downfall firsthand. My aim was to expose him, not to cause collateral damage to another victim. She would learn the truth soon enough, in the most painful, public way possible. My heart ached for her, for the pain she was about to endure, for the shattering of her own carefully constructed fantasy, but I knew that the truth, however painful, was ultimately liberating. And I was about to deliver it, wrapped in a perfectly planned birthday celebration, a gift of brutal honesty. The stage was set. The curtain was about to rise. And Julian Thorne had no idea he was about to star in his own spectacular downfall, a public humiliation that would forever define him. The day of Julian's birthday dawned with an unsettling calm, a deceptive tranquility that belied the tempest brewing inside me. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a stark contrast to the storm raging within my soul. I woke up early, the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach replaced by a cold, resolute determination, a quiet strength that felt almost alien. Every action felt deliberate, every breath a step closer to the inevitable, to the moment of reckoning. I went through the motions of preparing for the party, arranging flowers with meticulous care, setting up the catering with practiced ease, making sure every detail was perfect, every element precisely placed. It was a macabre dance, a performance for an audience of one, Julian, who remained utterly oblivious, basking in his self-importance. He woke up late, stretching languidly, a self-satisfied grin on his face, oblivious to the trap that was about to spring. "Happy birthday to me," he mumbled, pulling me closer, his lips brushing my forehead. "And to us, for making it all happen, darling." I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He spent the morning on his phone, making calls, presumably to his investor contacts, his voice booming with false confidence, his laughter echoing through the apartment. He even had the audacity to ask me for a small advance for some last-minute party supplies, claiming his card was acting up, a common refrain. I handed him the cash, watching him pocket it with a casual ease that made my blood run cold. He was truly shameless, utterly devoid of conscience. Chloe arrived early, ostensibly to help with the final preparations, but really to be my emotional anchor, my silent co-conspirator. Her eyes met mine across the kitchen, a silent acknowledgement of the storm to come, a shared understanding that transcended words. She squeezed my hand, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes, a silent promise of unwavering support. "You got this, Elara," she whispered, her voice firm, resolute. "He deserves every bit of it. And more." Her presence was a lifeline, grounding me in the reality of what I was about to do, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. The guests started arriving around 7, a steady stream of well-dressed individuals. Our apartment, usually a quiet sanctuary, filled with the murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter of strangers. Julian was in his element, holding court, his charm on full display, a dazzling performance for his unsuspecting audience. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, slapping backs, his honeyed words flowing effortlessly, weaving a web of false promises and grand illusions. He introduced me to his investor friends, a group of well-dressed, seemingly successful men and women who nodded politely, their expressions unreadable, their eyes assessing. I watched him, a detached observer, noting the subtle shifts in his posture, the way his eyes darted around the room, always assessing, always calculating, always searching for his next mark. He was a predator in a perfectly tailored suit, and I was no longer his prey. My heart pounded with a nervous energy, a strange, exhilarating mix of fear and anticipation. This was it. The moment of truth. I had rehearsed this in my mind 1,000 times, every word, every gesture, every calculated move. I had to remain calm, controlled, professional. This wasn't about hysterics, it was about exposing the truth, about dismantling a lie. As the evening progressed, the apartment grew warmer, the chatter louder, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and false bonhomie. Julian, flushed with success and a few too many drinks, pulled me aside, his arm slung around my waist, his breath warm and alcoholic against my ear. "Elara, darling," he slurred, his voice thick with self-congratulation, "you've outdone yourself. This is the best birthday ever. I knew you were the one, the only one who truly understood me." He leaned in, attempting to kiss me, his lips puckered. I suddenly turned my head, letting his lips brush my cheek, the revulsion almost overwhelming, a bitter taste in my mouth. But I held it in, maintaining my composure. "Happy birthday, Julian," I said. My voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging within. "I have a special surprise for you later. A very special one." He grinned, oblivious, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Oh, do you now? I like the sound of that. You always know how to surprise me." Around 9 o'clock, I signaled to Chloe. She subtly dimmed the lights, drawing everyone's attention, the sudden hush creating a dramatic silence. Julian, sensing the shift, beamed, assuming it was time for cake and presents, for another round of adulation. He stood in the center of the living room, a spotlight on his self-importance, his chest puffed out. I walked towards him, a small, elegant box in my hand, wrapped in shimmering silver paper, tied with a black satin ribbon. The room fell silent, all eyes on us, a collective anticipation hanging in the air. Julian's smile widened, anticipating a luxurious gift, another testament to my devotion, another trophy to add to his collection. "Julian," I began, my voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence like a sharpened blade. "Happy birthday." I held out the box, extending it towards him. He reached for it, his eyes sparkling with eager anticipation, his fingers brushing against the cool paper. "Before you open this," I continued, my voice unwavering, "I just want to say a few words. About our journey together. About trust. And about truth." A ripple of unease went through the crowd, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as the guests sensed that this was no ordinary birthday speech. Julian's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, a hint of suspicion dawning. He probably thought I was about to make a grand, romantic declaration, a public proposal even. He had no idea the gift was a Trojan horse, a beautifully wrapped package of his own undoing. I took a deep breath, the scent of his expensive cologne, once so intoxicating, suddenly sickening, a bitter reminder of his deceit. This was it. The moment of reckoning. The unmasking. The air in the room crackled with an unspoken tension, thick and suffocating. Julian, still holding the small, elegantly wrapped box, looked at me, a faint frown creasing his brow, his confusion slowly giving way to a dawning unease. "Elara, what is this?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of impatience, a subtle demand for me to get on with the expected romantic declaration. He probably expected a tearful declaration of love, a public display of devotion, a reaffirmation of my unwavering loyalty. He had no idea the gift was a Trojan horse, a meticulously crafted instrument of his downfall. "Julian," I repeated, my voice gaining strength, each word a deliberate, precise strike. "You've always been a man of grand visions, haven't you? Of big ideas, of imminent breakthroughs, of revolutionary concepts. You've often told me I wouldn't understand the complexities of your world, your confidentiality agreements, your investor stuff, your high-level negotiations. You made me feel small, insignificant, incapable of grasping your genius." I paused, letting my words hang in the air, watching his expression shift from confusion to a dawning unease, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Some of the guests exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the profound shift in the atmosphere, the unspoken tension that filled the room. "But I've been doing some research, Julian," I continued, my gaze unwavering, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the silence like a sharpened blade. "And it turns out, I understand quite a lot more than you gave me credit for. More than you ever wanted me to know." I took a step closer, my eyes locked on his, watching the color drain from his face. "For instance, I understand that your AI startup doesn't exist. That your co-founder, Mark, is a figment of your imagination, a convenient excuse for your late nights and evasive answers. And that your venture capitalists are as real as unicorns, as mythical as the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow." A collective gasp rippled through the room, a wave of shocked realization washing over the assembled guests. Julian's face, which had been a mask of smooth charm moments before, began to pale, a sickly gray replacing his usual healthy glow. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, for a way to regain control, for a lie to spin, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide from the truth I was about to unleash. "I also understand," I pressed on, my voice like ice, each word a carefully aimed bullet, "that the server fees and family emergency loans you took from me, totaling over $50,000, didn't go to any of those things. They went to luxury vacations, designer clothes, and expensive dinners for you and your other life." I held up my phone, displaying a screenshot of the bank statement, enlarged and projected onto the wall behind him using a small, discreet projector I had hidden earlier. The names of the high-end restaurants, the luxury boutiques, the exotic travel agencies, were starkly visible, a damning indictment of his profligacy. A murmur went through the crowd, a rising tide of disbelief and disgust. Julian finally found his voice, a strained, desperate whisper, barely audible. "Elara, what are you doing? This is insane. You're making things up. You're delusional." He tried to grab my arm, his hand reaching out, but I pulled away, my movement swift and decisive, avoiding his touch as if it were poison. "Am I, Julian?" I challenged, my voice rising slightly, ensuring everyone heard, every word resonating with a newfound authority. "Because I also understand that while you were building our future with my money, you were actually building a future with someone else. A future that excluded me entirely." I then, with a flick of my thumb, projected the screenshot of Serena's Instagram post onto the wall, the one with the caption, "2 years of adventures with my amazing fiancée. Can't wait for forever." The image of Julian and Serena, smiling, arms around each other, looking utterly in love, filled the wall behind him, a grotesque backdrop to his public humiliation. The room erupted. gasps, shocked whispers, angry murmurs, a cacophony of disbelief. Julian's face was ashen, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter defeat. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, exposed and vulnerable. His investor friends, the men and women he had so desperately tried to impress, stared at him, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and disgust, their faces contorted with the realization that they too had been played. "This is Serena," I stated, my voice ringing with a newfound authority, a powerful clarity that cut through the noise. "Your fiancée. The one you've been engaged to for 2 years. The one whose trips and lavish lifestyle you've been funding with my grandmother's inheritance, with my hard-earned money, while you spun me a web of lies about our shared future." Julian finally dropped the gift box. It clattered to the floor, forgotten, its contents irrelevant now. He lunged at me, his eyes wild with a mixture of fury and panic, a desperate attempt to silence me, to regain control. "You bitch. You crazy bitch. I'll sue you. This is defamation. You'll regret this." But before he could reach me, Chloe stepped in, her arm outstretched, blocking him, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "Don't you dare touch her, Julian," she growled, her voice low and dangerous, a primal warning. "Not one more step." I ignored him, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces in the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "And as for the big breakthrough and the imminent success he's been promising you all," I said, addressing his investor friends directly, my voice laced with a cold contempt, "it's all a fantasy. He's a con artist. A professional liar. He preys on trusting people, drains their resources, and then moves on to the next victim, leaving a trail of financial ruin and emotional devastation in his wake." I then pulled out a small, sleek USB drive from my pocket, holding it up for everyone to see, a tangible symbol of the truth. "I have compiled all the evidence," I announced, my voice resonating with conviction. "Bank statements, fabricated documents, and even recordings of his own admissions of guilt. His own chilling words. It's all here. And it will be going to the authorities first thing tomorrow morning." Julian stood there, defeated, exposed, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. The charming facade had shattered, revealing the hollow, manipulative, utterly pathetic core beneath. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the occasional shocked whisper, the rustle of clothing as people shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an unmasking, a public execution of his carefully cultivated persona. And the look on Julian's face, the sheer, unadulterated terror and humiliation, the dawning realization of his complete and utter ruin, was a bitter, satisfying victory. It was the taste of justice, finally. The party dissolved into chaos, a cacophony of shocked whispers, angry murmurs, and hurried departures. Julian, his face contorted with rage and humiliation, tried to bluster, to deny, to threaten, his voice cracking with desperation. But his words were hollow, devoid of their usual charm, drowned out by the collective shock and anger of the guests. His investor friends quickly made their excuses and left, their faces grim, their expressions a mixture of disgust and embarrassment. Our mutual friends, stunned by the revelation, offered awkward apologies and expressions of support, their eyes filled with pity and disbelief, their faces reflecting the profound shock of witnessing such a public unraveling. Chloe, ever the protector, ever the loyal friend, ushered Julian out of the apartment, her voice a low, steady threat, her hand firm on his arm. He left, not with a bang, but with a whimper, a pathetic, defeated figure slinking into the night, his shoulders slumped, his grand illusions shattered. The apartment, once filled with the illusion of celebration, now felt cold and empty, echoing with the ghosts of shattered dreams and broken promises. I sank onto the sofa, the adrenaline draining from my body, leaving me trembling, my limbs feeling like jelly. Chloe sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders, her presence a warm, comforting anchor. "You did it, Elara," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, a mix of pride and relief. "You were incredible. You were so brave." But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the raw, agonizing pain of betrayal, the lingering sting of humiliation. The humiliation, though now shared, still burned, a searing brand on my soul. The next few days were a blur of tears, exhaustion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. I filed a police report, providing them with the meticulously compiled dossier of evidence, the bank statements, the screenshots, the recordings, the entire damning narrative of his deceit. The detective, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Detective Miller, listened with a grim expression, her eyes sharp and perceptive. "This Mr. Thorne has a pattern, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice devoid of judgment, a quiet confirmation of my worst fears. "We've had similar reports before, but never with this level of comprehensive evidence. You've done a remarkable job of documenting his actions." Her words were a small comfort, a confirmation that I wasn't just a naive victim, but someone who had fought back, someone who had meticulously built a case against her abuser. I also contacted Serena, Julian's fiancée. It was one of the hardest things I had to do, a conversation I dreaded but knew was necessary. I found her number through a mutual friend of hers whose contact details I'd found in Julian's phone, which I had discreetly borrowed before he left, a small act of calculated revenge. My hands shook as I dialed, my heart pounding in my chest. She answered, her voice bright and cheerful, utterly unsuspecting. "Hello?" I introduced myself, and the line went silent, a sudden, chilling void. Then, a hesitant, "Elara? Julian's girlfriend?" My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Ex-girlfriend. And I have something you need to know, something that will change your life." I told her everything, calmly, factually, detailing the financial fraud, the double life, the public unmasking, providing her with the same evidence I'd given the police. There was a long silence on the other end, then a choked sob, a sound of profound heartbreak. No, he wouldn't. He loves me. He told me you were crazy, obsessed." The denial was heartbreaking, a mirror of my own initial disbelief, my own desperate clinging to a false reality. But as I continued, detailing the bank transactions, the fake startup, the overheard conversation, her resistance crumbled, replaced by a torrent of raw emotion. She started asking questions, desperate, angry questions, her voice rising with each new revelation. By the end of the call, she was sobbing uncontrollably, her world shattered. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw with pain and gratitude. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know what I would have done. I would have married him." My heart ached for her, another innocent victim of his elaborate charade, another woman whose trust he had so cruelly exploited. The fallout was swift and devastating for Julian. The police investigation moved quickly, bolstered by my comprehensive evidence and, I later learned, by Serena's own corroborating testimony. She had found her own evidence, small inconsistencies she dismissed as trivial, now glaringly obvious and profoundly incriminating. His investor friends, it turned out, were not entirely innocent either. Some were indeed legitimate investors he had been trying to con, others were simply acquaintances he had been trying to impress with his fabricated success. The news of his arrest, and the subsequent charges of multiple counts of fraud, hit the local media like a bombshell. Marcus, my journalist contact, ran a scathing exposé, detailing Julian's elaborate schemes, his multiple victims, and his chilling history of deception. The article, meticulously researched and heavily sourced from my dossier, went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media. His carefully constructed reputation, his entire public persona, was utterly destroyed, reduced to ashes. I received messages from other women, strangers who had read the article, sharing their own stories of being conned by Julian, or men just like him. Some had lost thousands, their life savings, their homes. Others had lost their self-respect, their trust in humanity, their very sense of identity. My story, my courage in exposing him, gave them a voice, a sense of validation, a glimmer of hope. It was a painful sisterhood, forged in the fires of betrayal, but it was also empowering, a collective rising from the ashes. I wasn't alone. We weren't alone. The financial recovery was slower, more arduous, a long and winding road. The loan I had taken out was significant, a heavy burden that had weighed on me for months, and even with legal action, recovering the full amount would take time. But the lawyer was confident. "He's facing serious charges, Ms. Vance," she'd said. "The court will likely order full restitution. It might be a payment plan, a long process, but you'll get your money back. It's a matter of time." The prospect of financial stability, of reclaiming my independence, of finally being free from his financial shadow, was a powerful motivator, a beacon of hope in the darkness. The emotional recovery was the hardest, a battle fought in the quiet corners of my mind. The initial anger slowly gave way to a profound sadness, a grief for the future I had envisioned, the trust one had so freely given, the love I had so desperately believed in. There were days when I felt utterly broken, when the humiliation threatened to consume me, when I questioned every decision I had ever made. But then I would look at the faces of the other women who had reached out, their stories echoing my own, or the determined expression on Chloe's face, her unwavering support, and I would find a flicker of strength, a spark of resilience. I had survived. I had fought back. And I was still standing, bruised but not broken. The truth, however painful, had set me free. And in that freedom, in that raw, exposed vulnerability, I began to see the first glimmerings of a new, stronger Elara, a woman forged in fire. The weeks that followed Julian's unmasking were a strange blend of catharsis and profound exhaustion. Like the aftermath of a violent storm. The initial adrenaline rush had faded, leaving behind a raw, tender vulnerability, a deep ache in my soul. My apartment, once a symbol of his deceit, a stage for his elaborate charade, slowly began to feel like my own again, a space where I could finally breathe freely. I started by purging everything that reminded me of him, his clothes, his books, the few trinkets he'd left behind, each item a tangible link to a painful past. Each item I packed away or donated felt like shedding a layer of skin, a painful but necessary exfoliation, a symbolic cleansing. Chloe was a constant presence, a steadfast anchor in the swirling currents of my grief. She brought me home-cooked meals, listening patiently to my endless rehashing of events, my desperate attempts to make sense of the senseless, and simply sitting with me in comfortable silence when I had no words left, her presence a silent balm. The legal process was slow, methodical, and often frustrating, a bureaucratic labyrinth that tested my patience. Julian, predictably, tried to deny everything, to paint me as a scorned, delusional ex-girlfriend, a mentally unstable woman seeking revenge. But the evidence was overwhelming, an undeniable mountain of proof. My lawyer, Ms. Davies, was a bulldog, tearing apart his flimsy defenses with surgical precision, exposing his lies with ruthless efficiency. The financial fraud charges were clear, irrefutable, and the emotional distress claim was bolstered by my testimony and the sheer audacity of his deception. It was a draining process, forcing me to relive the pain, to revisit the moments of humiliation, but each court appearance, each deposition, each legal victory, felt like another step towards reclaiming my power, towards asserting my truth. I also started therapy. It wasn't an easy decision. Admitting I needed help felt like another form of weakness, another confirmation of my brokenness. But Chloe insisted, gently but firmly, and I was desperate for a way to process the trauma, to heal the deep wounds he had inflicted. My therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, was a gentle but firm guide, her voice calm and reassuring. She helped me unpack the layers of manipulation, to understand how I had been gaslighted, how my self-worth had been systematically eroded, how I had been conditioned to doubt my own reality. She taught me about red flags, about healthy boundaries, about the insidious nature of narcissistic abuse, about the subtle ways in which my autonomy had been chipped away. It was like learning a new language, a language of self-preservation, of emotional intelligence. I realized how much of my identity had become intertwined with Julian, how I had allowed his narrative to define me, to dictate my worth. The work was hard, painful, often exhausting, but incredibly liberating. I was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding my sense of self, brick by brick, reclaiming the woman I was before him, and forging a new, stronger version. My career, which had felt stagnant under Julian's shadow, overshadowed by his grand pronouncements and my financial anxieties, began to flourish again. Free from his constant subtle criticisms and the pressure to fund his illusions, I found my passion for marketing reignited, a spark that had been dormant for too long. I took on new projects, proposed innovative campaigns, and started speaking up more in meetings, my voice clear and confident. My colleagues noticed the change, the renewed spark in my eyes, the newfound assertiveness in my demeanor. My boss even commended me on my renewed focus and creativity, on my ability to lead and innovate. It felt good to be recognized for my own merits, for my own intelligence and capabilities, not as an extension of someone else's fabricated brilliance. Socially, things were also shifting, a natural consequence of my renewed sense of self. Some friends, those who had been too quick to judge or too uncomfortable with my pain, drifted away, their absence a quiet confirmation of their superficiality. But the true ones, like Chloe, remained steadfast, their loyalty unwavering. And I started forming new connections, people who saw me for who I was. Not for who I was with, people who appreciated my authentic self. I joined a book club, started taking a pottery class, finding solace and joy in creative expression, and even reconnected with an old university friend who shared my love for hiking. These new connections were built on genuine shared interests, on mutual respect, not on the superficial glamour Julian had craved, not on transactional relationships. One evening, I received a message from Serena. She had seen the news reports, read Marcus's article, the full, devastating truth laid bare. She thanked me again, profusely, for exposing Julian, for saving her from a similar fate. She told me she had also filed a police report, providing additional evidence she had uncovered after our call, small details that, in hindsight, were glaring red flags. He tried to gaslight me, too, she wrote, her words echoing my own experience, told me you were crazy, obsessed, a vengeful ex. But I saw the proof. And I saw the truth. And it set me free. She was heartbroken, but also determined, her spirit unbroken. We exchanged a few more messages, a quiet solidarity forming between us, two women who had been used and discarded, now finding strength in shared experience, in collective healing. It was a poignant reminder that my fight wasn't just for myself, it was for all the others he had harmed, and for those he might have harmed in the future. The journey was far from over. The scars were still fresh, still tender, and there were days when the memories would resurface, bringing with them a wave of anger or sadness, a phantom pain. But those waves were less frequent, less overwhelming, their intensity diminished. I was learning to ride them, to acknowledge the pain without letting it consume me, to feel the emotions without being defined by them. I was learning to trust my instincts again, to listen to that quiet whisper of doubt that I had once so readily ignored, to honor my own intuition. I was learning to love myself, not as a reflection of someone else's desires, not as a means to an end, but as a complete, resilient, and worthy individual. The golden cage had shattered, and from its ruins, I was building something far more precious, my own freedom, my own authentic life. The day of Julian's sentencing was a cold, gray morning, fitting for the somber occasion, a reflection of the gravity of the moment. I dressed in a simple, dark suit, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and a quiet sense of finality, a profound closure. Chloe was by my side, her hand a reassuring weight on my arm, her presence a silent strength. Serena was also there, sitting a few rows behind us, her face pale but resolute, her eyes meeting mine in a brief, knowing glance. We were united in our shared experience, two women who had walked through fire and emerged, scarred but unbroken, standing tall. The courtroom was quiet, filled with a handful of journalists, their pens poised, a few curious onlookers, and the families of other victims who had come forward after Marcus's exposé, their faces etched with pain and a hopeful anticipation of justice. Julian was brought in, looking significantly diminished, a shadow of his former self. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a drab prison jumpsuit. His once charming smile was replaced by a sullen scowl, his honeyed eyes now held a desperate, hunted look, devoid of their former sparkle. He avoided my gaze, unable to meet my eyes, which was a small victory in itself, a silent acknowledgement of his guilt. The man who had once commanded every room he entered, who had effortlessly manipulated those around him, was now a pathetic figure, stripped of his power, his charisma, his carefully constructed illusion. The prosecutor laid out the case meticulously, detailing the financial fraud, the emotional manipulation, the systematic deception, the intricate web of lies he had woven. My testimony was presented, along with Serena's, and the damning evidence I had meticulously collected, each piece a nail in his coffin. The judge listened, her expression stern and unyielding, her gaze fixed on the proceedings. Julian's lawyer, a tired-looking man, offered a weak defense, trying to paint him as a misguided entrepreneur, a victim of circumstance, a man who had simply made poor business decisions. But the weight of the evidence was too heavy, too overwhelming, too irrefutable. When it was my turn to speak, to deliver my victim impact statement, my voice trembled at first, a slight tremor betraying the profound emotion churning within. I looked at Julian, truly looked at him, not with anger, not with hatred, but with a profound sense of pity for the empty shell of a man he was, for the wasted potential, for the life he had chosen. Julian Thorne, I began, my voice gaining strength with each word, resonating with conviction, you didn't just steal my money. You stole my trust. You stole my peace of mind. You stole years of my life, years I spent believing in a lie, investing in a ghost, building a future that never existed. I recounted the emotional toll, the gaslighting, the isolation, the profound humiliation of discovering his betrayal, the agonizing process of picking up the pieces of my shattered life. I spoke not just for myself, but for every woman he had conned, for every dream he had shattered, for every heart he had broken. You are not a misguided entrepreneur, Mr. Thorne, I concluded, my voice firm and clear, ringing with an undeniable truth. You are a predator. And today, your reign of deceit ends. Today, you will finally face justice. The judge delivered her verdict swiftly and decisively. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was handed down, a significant prison term, a just punishment for his crimes, and a court order for full restitution to all victims, including me, a tangible acknowledgement of the harm he had inflicted. A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought me to my knees, a deep, cleansing breath after years of holding my breath. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a moral one, a triumph of truth over deception. It was the universe rebalancing itself, justice finally served, a heavy burden lifted from my shoulders. Julian's face crumpled. He looked utterly broken, a man who had finally run out of lies, out of excuses, out of chances. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of reporters waited, their cameras flashing, their microphones extended. Marcus was there, a respectful distance away, his presence a silent nod of support. I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of strength, a quiet confidence. This was my moment, not just to speak my truth, but to offer hope to others, to be a voice for the voiceless. I spoke calmly, clearly, about the importance of trusting your instincts, of seeking help, of the power of community in overcoming abuse. I didn't dwell on the pain, I focused on the resilience, on the path to healing, on the strength that could be found in vulnerability. I looked directly into the cameras, my gaze steady, my voice resonating with conviction. To anyone out there who might be experiencing something similar, I said, my voice unwavering, please know you are not alone. Your instincts are valid. And you are stronger than you think. There is a way out. There is light on the other side. You can reclaim your life. Later that day, Chloe, Serena, and I went for coffee. The atmosphere was lighter, a sense of shared triumph, of quiet celebration in the air. Serena told me she was starting therapy too, and that she was going to focus on rebuilding her life, on finding her own path to healing. We talked about the future, about what we had learned, about the strength we had found within ourselves, about the profound lessons learned from our shared ordeal. It was a quiet, powerful moment of sisterhood, a testament to the fact that even from the deepest betrayal, connection and healing could emerge, a beautiful, unexpected bloom. The journey had been long, painful, and at times, utterly despairing. But I had walked through the fire, and I had come out on the other side, not unscathed, but undeniably stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than I had ever been. The golden cage was gone, its bars shattered, and the world, vast and open, stretched before me, filled with possibilities I had never dared to dream of. A future I was finally ready to embrace. Even with Julian behind bars and the legal victory secured, the echoes of his betrayal lingered, a phantom limb of pain and distress. It wasn't a switch I could simply flip off, a wound that instantly healed. The trauma had seeped into my bones, manifesting in subtle ways, in unexpected moments. I found myself flinching at unexpected touches, scrutinizing every compliment for hidden agendas, dissecting every new acquaintance's words for hidden motives, for the subtle signs of manipulation. The world, once a place of innocent possibility, now felt laced with potential deception, a minefield of hidden traps. Trust, once freely given, was now a precious commodity, earned only through consistent, undeniable proof, through repeated acts of genuine kindness and honesty. My nights were often restless, haunted by replays of his gaslighting, his charming lies, the moment of public humiliation, the chilling sound of his laughter on the phone. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the phantom sensation of his arm around me, a comforting weight that was now a chilling reminder of his deceit, a grotesque parody of love. Dr. Sharma, my therapist, called these trauma responses, normal reactions to a profound violation of trust, to a deep emotional wound. She encouraged me to acknowledge them, to feel them, to process them, but not to let them define me, not to let them dictate my future. It's like a muscle memory, Elara, she'd explained, her voice calm and reassuring. Your brain is trying to protect you. But with time and conscious effort, you can retrain it, you can build new pathways, new responses. I started implementing new routines, rituals of self-care designed to ground me in the present, to reconnect me with my own body and mind. Morning meditations, long walks in the park, journaling my thoughts and feelings, pouring out the raw emotions onto the page. I focused on rebuilding my relationship with myself, rediscovering the woman Julian had tried to erase, the vibrant, curious woman who had been buried under layers of self-doubt and fear. I remembered my love for painting, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago, dismissing it as frivolous under Julian's influence. I bought a new set of brushes and canvases, and found solace in the vibrant colors, the tactile sensation of paint on canvas, the quiet joy of creation. It was a way to express the emotions I couldn't always articulate, a visual diary of my healing journey, a silent scream, a quiet triumph. Financially, the restitution process was indeed slow, but steady, a gradual trickle of payments that slowly but surely chipped away at my debt. Small payments began to trickle in, a tangible sign of justice, a concrete reminder that he was being held accountable. My lawyer was diligent, keeping me informed every step of the way, fighting tirelessly on my behalf. It wasn't about the money anymore, not entirely. It was about the principle, about him being held accountable for his actions, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The financial burden I had carried for so long began to lighten, allowing me to breathe a little easier, to plan for my future without the constant shadow of debt, without the gnawing anxiety of financial insecurity. My relationship with Chloe deepened into an unbreakable bond, a sisterhood forged in the fires of adversity. She had seen me at my absolute lowest, and had stood by me, unwavering, her loyalty a constant source of strength. We spent countless evenings talking, laughing, sometimes crying, sharing our deepest fears and our brightest hopes. She was the sister I never had, a steadfast presence in a world that had felt so unstable, so unpredictable. She encouraged me to date again, gently, when I felt ready, reminding me that not all men were like Julian. But the thought of opening myself up to someone new, of trusting again, felt terrifying, like stepping onto a tightrope without a safety net. The idea of navigating the treacherous waters of modern dating, with its apps and curated personas, filled me with dread. I wasn't ready. And I knew that was okay. Healing wasn't a race, it was a marathon. A slow, deliberate journey of self-discovery. Serena and I continued to stay in touch, our connection growing stronger with each conversation. We met for coffee occasionally, sharing stories of our progress, our challenges, our moments of triumph. She was also slowly rebuilding her life, finding her own strength, her own path to healing. She had started a support group for victims of financial fraud and emotional abuse, a safe space where women could share their experiences and find solidarity, a place where their voices could be heard without judgment. I attended a few meetings, listening to their stories, offering my own insights, sharing the lessons I had learned. It was incredibly powerful to be in a room full of women who understood, who didn't judge, who offered empathy and practical advice. It was a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience, for turning pain into purpose, for finding light in the darkest of places. The public attention from Marcus's article eventually faded, replaced by new headlines, new scandals, new stories. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. I didn't want to be defined by my past, by what Julian had done to me, by the label of victim. I wanted to be defined by my strength, my recovery, my future, by the woman I was becoming. I was Elara Vance, not Julian Thorne's victim. I was a survivor, a thriver, a woman who had learned the hard way that true love isn't about grand gestures or empty promises, but about respect, honesty, and genuine connection. And I was finally ready to live that truth, fully and unapologetically, embracing my newfound freedom. Months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. The sharp edges of the pain began to soften, rounding into a dull ache that only surfaced occasionally, like a phantom limb, a distant memory. I was no longer defined by the betrayal, but by my resilience, by the strength I had discovered within myself. The therapy had worked wonders, equipping me with tools to manage lingering anxiety and to recognize red flags before they unfurled into full-blown disasters, before they could ensnare me again. I learned to trust my gut, that quiet whisper of intuition I had so readily ignored in the past. It was my internal compass, guiding me away from potential pitfalls and towards genuine connection, towards authentic relationships. My apartment, once a place of subtle dread, a constant reminder of Julian's presence, had been completely transformed. I redecorated, choosing colors and textures that evoked peace and strength, a sanctuary of my own creation. It was no longer a stage for Julian's performance, but a true sanctuary, a reflection of my own evolving self, a space that felt truly mine. I filled it with art I'd created, vibrant and expressive, books that nourished my soul, and plants that thrived under my care, mirroring my own growth and resilience. Professionally, I was thriving. I had been promoted to a director role, leading a team of talented marketers, my ideas respected, my leadership valued. I found immense satisfaction in mentoring younger colleagues, sharing not just my professional expertise, but also the hard-won wisdom about self-worth and boundaries, about the importance of trusting your instincts. I even gave a few internal talks on resilience in the face of adversity, subtly weaving in my personal journey without explicitly detailing the trauma, allowing my experience to inform my message. It was empowering to turn my pain into a source of inspiration for others, to transform my suffering into a tool for growth. Dating, surprisingly, became less terrifying, less like navigating a minefield. I dipped my toes in, cautiously at first, using apps but with a much clearer sense of what I wanted and, more importantly, what I didn't want. I learned to identify love bombing, to spot the subtle signs of narcissism, to walk away from anything that felt remotely like a replay of my past, anything that triggered that familiar unease. There were a few false starts, a few awkward coffee dates, but each one was a learning experience, a testament to my growing self-awareness, to my ability to protect myself. I wasn't looking for a savior. I was looking for a partner, someone who respected my independence and celebrated my strength, someone who saw me for who I truly was. One evening, I found myself on a first date with a man named Leo. He was a software engineer, quiet but with a dry wit and a genuine curiosity about the world, a refreshing change from the performative charm I had grown accustomed to. We talked for hours, about books, about travel, about our passions, about the mundane and the profound. There was no grand performance, no dazzling charm, just a comfortable, authentic connection, a quiet ease that settled between us. He listened, truly listened, when I spoke, and his questions were thoughtful, insightful, demonstrating a genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings. When I casually mentioned my love for hiking, he didn't scoff or try to redirect the conversation. Instead, his eyes lit up. "I love hiking too. Do you know the trails up in the Cascades? We should go sometime." It was a small moment, a seemingly insignificant detail, but it felt profoundly significant. There was no judgment, no attempt to diminish my interests, no subtle undermining. Just shared enthusiasm, a genuine connection. As the evening drew to a close, he walked me to my door. There was no pressure, no expectation, no lingering touch that felt like a demand. Just a gentle smile, a quiet warmth in his eyes. "I had a really wonderful time, Elara," he said, his voice soft, sincere. "I'd love to see you again, if you're open to it." I looked at him, truly seeing him, seeing the kindness and honesty in his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of genuine hope, unburdened by fear or cynicism, a pure, unadulterated sense of possibility. "I'd like that very much, Leo," I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips, a smile that reached my eyes. The path to healing wasn't linear, not a straight line from pain to recovery. There were still days when the shadows of the past would creep in, moments of doubt or sadness, a sudden wave of anxiety. But they were fewer and farther between, their intensity diminished. And when they did come, I had the tools to navigate them, the support system to lean on, and the inner strength to remind myself of how far I had come, of the battles I had fought and won. I was no longer the naive woman who had fallen for a charming lie. I was a woman who had faced betrayal head-on, dismantled a con artist's empire, and rebuilt her life with courage and grace. I was whole again, not despite what had happened, but because of it. The quiet strength I had cultivated was my greatest victory, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal, to grow, and to find light even in the darkest of places. The impact of Julian's unmasking extended far beyond my immediate circle, creating ripples that spread outward, touching lives I never knew existed. Marcus's article, which had initially gone viral, continued to resurface in online communities dedicated to exposing scams and narcissistic abuse, becoming a cautionary tale, a beacon of warning. I occasionally received messages from strangers, some thanking me for my courage, others sharing their own similar stories, often with a sense of relief that they weren't alone, that their experiences were validated. It was a strange, unexpected form of community, born from shared pain but leading to collective empowerment, a network of survivors. Serena's support group, which she had named Phoenix Rising, flourished, growing from a small local gathering to a powerful national network. I became an active participant, eventually taking on a mentorship role, sharing my insights and experiences. We met weekly, a diverse group of women from different backgrounds, all united by the common thread of having been exploited by manipulative partners. We shared strategies for financial recovery, tips for navigating the legal system, and most importantly, emotional support, a safe space for vulnerability and healing. We celebrated each other's small victories, a recovered sum of money, a successful therapy session, a brave step towards a new relationship, a moment of self-acceptance. It was an incredibly powerful testament to the fact that healing wasn't a solitary journey, but a collective effort. One particularly poignant moment came when a young woman, barely out of college, shared her story. She had been conned out of her entire life savings by a charming older man who promised her a startup investment opportunity, a mirror of my own initial deception. Her eyes were filled with despair, a mirror of my own emotions years prior, a raw, aching pain. I listened, my heart aching, and then shared my own journey, focusing on the steps I took to reclaim my life, to rebuild from the ashes. I saw a flicker of hope ignite in her eyes, a recognition that it was possible to survive, to thrive, to emerge stronger. It was then that I truly understood the profound impact of speaking my truth, of turning my pain into purpose, of transforming my suffering into a source of strength for others. The restitution payments from Julian, though still ongoing, were becoming more substantial, a tangible sign of accountability. The lawyer informed me that he was being forced to sell some assets he had hidden, assets he had acquired through his various scams, a painful liquidation of his ill-gotten gains. It was a slow process, but the fact that he was being forced to liquidate his ill-gotten gains felt like a true victory, a triumph of justice. The money, when it finally arrived, wasn't just cash, it was a symbol of justice, a tangible representation of his accountability, a physical manifestation of my reclamation. I used a portion of it to pay off the remaining balance on my apartment loan, finally freeing myself from that last financial tether to him, from the last tangible link to my past. The relief was immense, a deep exhale after years of holding my breath, a profound sense of liberation. My relationship with Leo continued to blossom, deepening with every passing month. He was everything Julian wasn't, consistent, honest, and genuinely kind. He celebrated my successes without a hint of envy, and offered quiet support during my moments of vulnerability, a steady, unwavering presence. He never tried to control me, never gaslight me, never made me feel less than, never attempted to diminish my spirit. He respected my boundaries, understood my need for space, and patiently navigated my occasional moments of distrust, earning my trust with every genuine interaction, every honest word. We went on hiking trips, explored new cities, and spent quiet evenings reading together, our lives intertwined in a comfortable, authentic rhythm. It was a love built on mutual respect and shared values, a stark contrast to the performative, manipulative relationship of my past, a love that felt profoundly real and true. I also found a new passion project, volunteering at a local women's shelter. I started by helping with administrative tasks, but soon found myself drawn to the stories of the women there, many of whom had experienced various forms of abuse and exploitation, their resilience inspiring. I began leading workshops on financial literacy and building self-esteem, drawing on my own experiences and the hard-won lessons I had learned in therapy. It was incredibly fulfilling to empower these women, to help them navigate their own paths to independence and healing, to offer them a roadmap to a brighter future. It was a way of giving back, of transforming my own pain into a source of strength for others, a testament to the power of human connection. The echoes of betrayal would always be a part of my story, a scar that reminded me of where I had been, of the battles I had fought. But they no longer defined me. They were a reminder of my strength, my resilience, and the profound capacity for healing that lay within. I had not just survived, I had thrived. And in doing so, I had created a ripple effect, touching lives, offering hope, and contributing to a world where women, like me, could rise from the ashes, stronger and more radiant than ever before. Life, in its unpredictable way, continued to unfold, bringing new challenges and unexpected joys, each day a new opportunity for growth. The past, though still a part of my narrative, receded further into the background, becoming a foundational chapter rather than the entire story, a distant echo rather than a constant roar. I was no longer just healing, I was flourishing, blooming into the woman I was always meant to be. My career trajectory continued its upward climb, a testament to my dedication and newfound confidence. I was offered a coveted position at a leading global marketing agency, a dream job that required a move to a new city, a fresh start. It was a daunting prospect, leaving behind the familiar, my friends, my established routines, but also an exhilarating opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to redefine myself in a new environment. Leo, ever supportive, ever my biggest cheerleader, encouraged me to take the leap. "This is your moment, Elara," he'd said, his eyes shining with pride, his voice filled with unwavering belief. "Go for it. We'll make it work. We'll figure it out together." His unwavering belief in me was a stark contrast to Julian's subtle undermining, a testament to the healthy, empowering relationship we had built, a love that lifted me up rather than tearing me down. The move was liberating, a profound act of self-reclamation. A new apartment, a new neighborhood, a new rhythm of life, each element a fresh canvas. It felt like shedding another layer of the past, embracing a future unburdened by old ghosts, by painful memories. I found a new therapist in the new city, continuing my journey of self-discovery and emotional growth, delving deeper into the complexities of my own psyche. We focused on building deeper connections, on embracing vulnerability, on fully integrating the lessons learned from my past into a stronger, more resilient present, a future built on authenticity. My work at the new agency was challenging and stimulating, pushing me to new heights of creativity and strategic thinking. I thrived in the dynamic environment, leading innovative campaigns and collaborating with brilliant minds, finding immense satisfaction in my contributions. I found myself speaking at industry conferences, sharing insights on ethical marketing and consumer trust, themes that resonated deeply with my personal experiences, with the lessons I had learned the hard way. It was a powerful full-circle moment, transforming my pain into professional expertise, my suffering into a source of wisdom. My relationship with Leo deepened with every passing month, evolving into a partnership built on unwavering trust and mutual respect, a profound connection that felt both exhilarating and deeply comforting. We moved in together, creating a home filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the comforting rhythm of everyday love, a sanctuary of peace and belonging. He was my confidant, my biggest cheerleader, and a constant source of calm in a sometimes chaotic world, his presence a steady anchor. We talked about the future, not with the grand, empty pronouncements Julian had favored, but with practical, heartfelt discussions about shared dreams, realistic goals, and a genuine desire to build a life together, brick by honest brick, with integrity and love. There was no pressure, no manipulation, just a steady, evolving love that felt profoundly real, profoundly true. The restitution payments from Julian eventually ceased. My lawyer informed me that he had declared bankruptcy, having exhausted all his hidden assets, all his ill-gotten gains. While I didn't recover every single penny, the vast majority of the loan and damages had been repaid, a significant portion of what he had stolen. The financial closure felt significant, a final severing of the last tangible link to him, a symbolic release. It was a powerful reminder that justice, though sometimes slow, could prevail, that accountability could be achieved. Serena and I remained close friends, our bond forged in the crucible of shared adversity, a testament to the strength of female solidarity. Her Phoenix Rising support group had expanded, becoming a national network, offering resources and community to countless women, a beacon of hope for survivors. She had become a passionate advocate for victims of financial abuse, speaking at conferences and lobbying for stronger legal protections, turning her own pain into a powerful force for change. Her journey, like mine, was a testament to the transformative power of turning pain into purpose, of finding light in the darkest of places. I also reconnected with my family, something I had neglected during my time with Julian, his subtle manipulations having often made me feel like I had to choose between him and them. Now, free from that insidious influence, I actively nurtured those relationships, finding comfort and love in the embrace of my parents and siblings, a reminder of the unconditional support I had always had. It was a reminder that true support systems were built on unconditional love, not on transactional relationships, not on manipulation. Looking back, the naive, vulnerable Elara of years past felt like a distant memory, a ghost of who I once was, a character in a story that was no longer mine. The woman I had become was stronger, wiser, more empathetic, and fiercely protective of her peace, her boundaries, her sense of self. I had learned that betrayal, while devastating, could also be a catalyst for profound growth, a painful but necessary crucible. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to redefine my boundaries, and to discover an inner strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience that surprised even myself. The golden cage had shattered, but in its destruction, it had revealed a boundless sky, an infinite expanse of possibility. And I was finally ready to spread my wings and soar, unburdened and free. The passage of time continued its relentless march, bringing with it new seasons, new experiences, and a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the woman I had become. The echoes of Julian Thorne, once a haunting presence, a constant shadow, had faded into a distant whisper, a cautionary tale I occasionally shared, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of triumph, a testament to my survival. He was a footnote in my story, a painful but necessary chapter that had ultimately led me to a richer, more authentic life, a life built on truth and genuine connection. My relationship with Leo continued to deepen, evolving into a partnership built on unwavering trust and mutual respect, a profound connection that felt both exhilarating and deeply comforting. We had built a life together, a home filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the comforting rhythm of everyday love, a sanctuary of peace and belonging. We traveled, explored new passions, and navigated life's challenges as a united front, our bond strengthening with each shared experience. He was my anchor, not in the way Julian had falsely promised, but in the true sense of the word, a steady, loving presence that grounded me without ever holding me back, a partner who celebrated my independence. We talked about marriage, about children, about a future that felt not just possible, but beautifully real and within reach, a future we were actively building together. And this time, there was no anxiety, no hidden doubts, just a profound sense of peace and rightness, a quiet certainty. Professionally, I reached a pinnacle I never thought possible. I was appointed head of global marketing for the agency, a role that came with immense responsibility and influence, a testament to my hard work and leadership. I leveraged my position to champion ethical practices, to advocate for transparency, and to create marketing campaigns that truly resonated with authenticity, with integrity. My past experiences had given me a unique perspective, a deep understanding of the power of narrative and the dangers of manipulation, a wisdom I now applied to my work. I used that understanding to build trust, not to break it, to connect with people on a deeper, more meaningful level. My work with the Phoenix Rising Network continued to be a source of immense fulfillment, a profound sense of purpose. Serena and I co-authored a book, a comprehensive guide for women navigating financial abuse and emotional manipulation, filled with practical advice, personal stories, and resources for healing. It became a bestseller, reaching countless women around the world, offering them hope and a roadmap to recovery, a testament to the power of shared experience. We traveled together, speaking at conferences, sharing our stories, and empowering others to reclaim their lives, to find their own voices. It was a powerful testament to the transformative power of turning pain into purpose, of finding light in the darkest of places, of transforming suffering into strength. I also found a renewed connection with my own creativity. My painting had evolved, becoming more expressive, more vibrant, a true reflection of my inner landscape. I started exhibiting my work in local galleries, my art a visual representation of my journey, the shadows of the past, the vibrant colors of healing, the boundless horizons of the future. It was a deeply personal form of expression, a way to process my emotions and to share my story without words, a silent narrative of resilience. Looking back at the woman I was before Julian, the naive, trusting Elara, I felt a pang of tenderness, not regret. She had to go through what she did to become who I am today, to forge the strength and wisdom I now possessed. The scars were still there, faint but present, a reminder of the battles fought and won, of the crucible I had endured. But they were no longer wounds, they were badges of honor, symbols of resilience, wisdom, and an unwavering belief in my own strength. The journey had been long, arduous, and at times utterly terrifying. But it had led me here, to a life filled with authentic love, meaningful work, and profound self-acceptance. I had learned that true strength isn't about never falling, but about rising every single time, about picking yourself up and moving forward. I had learned that forgiveness, ultimately, was for myself, a release from the bitterness that had once threatened to consume me, a liberation of my spirit. And most importantly, I had learned that the most beautiful love story you can ever write is the one you create for yourself, filled with self-respect, dignity, and an unshakable belief in your own worth. The golden cage was a distant memory. The horizon stretched wide and bright, and I was ready for whatever beautiful adventures awaited me. I was free. And I was finally, truly, home.